Inflation's become a buzzword this year, but there's no denying its impact on nearly every sector of our economy, and as a result, finding a great watch under $100 proves no easy task. But luckily, there are a few remaining survivors left unscathed as the dust has begun to settle. In this guide, we'll go back to the basics to explore a curated selection of our favorite watches that you can still manage to procure under $100. Maybe you're looking for the perfect gift, or maybe you're just looking for yourself. Whatever the case may be, our job is to provide you with a detailed overview as to what you can expect when you begin your own search, if this is your first stop along the way. But before we dive in, we do want to reiterate that there's absolutely no shame searching for a watch with only a Benjamin to spend. At the end of the day, a $5,000 watch and a $100 watch both tell the time. Every man deserves a great watch, and some of the most archetypal references carry budget price tags, holding special places in the hearts of experts and enthusiasts alike. So without further ado, let's dive in and take a tour of our favorite picks for a great watch under $100. Casio and quartz movements go together like, well, you can pick your poison. For just under $25, the Casio World Time is a phenomenal example. Before we get into specifics, let's get you caught up about Casio themselves. The year was 1969 when Seiko rattled the watchmaking world with the first commercial quartz wristwatch, the Seiko Quartz Astron 35 SQ. Hot on their heels, fellow Japanese brand Casio followed suit, debuting similar low-cost quartz references, aimed at taking on the mechanical Swiss watchmaking industry headfirst. Largely dismissive, Swiss heritage watchmakers continued their mechanical pursuits in the decades to follow, continuing to enjoy their effective monopoly, but by 1980, quartz-powered movements were overtaking the horological world and couldn't be ignored. We imagine headlines everywhere in Switzerland read, "The Quartz Crisis," for how dire the situation became for old-school watchmakers. Alright, maybe not everywhere, but this digital revolution did see some Swiss brands to their eventual demise, which certainly made the watch world pay attention. Since then, Casio along with other Japanese watchmaking brands have dominated the quartz watch market, consistently offering low-cost watches with specifications and charm even experts can get behind. The Casio World Time proves the perfect example. As the most affordable and equally well-respected timepiece on our list, you can currently pick this guy up for just $25, often with sales even further sinking it to below $20. Let's take a closer look. Like most Casios, the 39.5mm World Time absolutely packs in features with a dial display full of mini digital screens for each major function, punctuated by black framing. And you'll also quickly notice that this quartz-powered watch features a 10-year battery life rating for decades-long maintenance-free operation. Dimensionally, as we said, it sports a 39.5mm case with a 12mm thickness with a water resistance of 100 meters or 330 feet. Apart from the dial, which we'll get into in just a moment, the four highly polished silver tone pushers definitely give the World Time a retro-futuristic appearance that lands somewhere in the vicinity of a chronograph, and although the World Time does have start-stop functions, it's also not branded as a chronograph, even though the digital nature of the watch is definitely optimal for precise timing applications. Anyways, we digress. On the right side, the World Time sports two pushers, one roughly at the 2 o'clock position for a backlight and one just below around the 4 o'clock position that reads as Search and controls access to any secondary time zones. On the left-hand side, two other symmetrically laid out pushes at the 10 and 7 for switching through various modes to adjust the settings as necessary. Now, we've established that the World Time isn't necessarily a chronograph despite its timing capabilities, but as the name suggests, the watch could certainly be a digital equivalent of a GMT, as it provides the ability to quickly cycle through 31 time zones mirrored on a quirky digital world map across 48 cities. The map's unique charm only further adds to all the love this watch gets, and is really a defining visual feature of the World Time. Just below, you have the largest section of the dial display that shows the day, date, and time. And just north in the upper left-hand corner, a digital dial layout for timing, framed by a traditional 60-minute chapter ring, with small white applied numerals every 5 minutes, and tiny indices for each minute in between. So, if you've been looking for a watch well under $100 packed with charm that will last a virtual lifetime with very little maintenance, the World Time is undeniably your best bet. Founded nearly 170 years ago in the United States, Timex has been manufacturing watches for nearly 2 centuries aimed at the everyman, hell-bent on making quality watches anyone can afford. None better represents their model than the Timex Expedition Scout 40mm, an iconic and wildly accessible quartz-powered field watch you can pick up for around $40 virtually anywhere. Don't take our word for it, this particular reference has over 15,000 reviews online, with an average rating of 4.4 out of 5. As a prime contender for Casio, both brands have carved out a special place for themselves in the horology world, for entirely different reasons. This absolute staple pick does have a few quirks, as well as a few much-loved defining features, so let's dive in. The case is, as the name suggests, 40mm in diameter, with a 49mm lug-to-lug and a 10mm thickness, shaping up to be a well-proportioned and comfortable size for most wrists, our wearer here with a measurement just shy of 8 inches for context. In order to keep prices from inflating, Timex has turned to brass for the Expedition's matte case instead of a more expensive stainless steel, as you may have expected. As a coated unit for all-around daily wear, you'll hardly notice this construction cue due to the coating itself. The Scout also uses a push-pull crown for adjusting the three-hander and affords a very modest 50 meters of water resistance. Under mineral crystal, Timex builds in a very classically styled field watch-inspired dial with an outer ring of indices, followed by two 24-hour rings in Arabic numerals, logo text to the 12, and dial text for the Indiglo Lume technology built into the entire dial background. By pushing the crown, you activate an electroluminescent panel that acts as a backlight for edge-to-edge illumination, instead of using loomed indices or numerals as is typical for a field watch. Doing so affords bright legibility across the whole surface of the dial, and the intensity stays consistent no matter how many times the dial is pressed, unlike traditional applied lume that fades over time. Rounding out its distinctive dial features, each colorway of the Timex Expedition Scout, of which there are a few, sports a contrasting seconds hand of differing bold accent colors, and sports an iconic arrow shape and a simple white date cutout at the 3 o'clock position. Also keep in mind that at this price point, quality control can be a little iffy, so if you experience any accidental hand movement when trying to push in the crown after a date or time adjustment, just know that's par for the course and has been reported. At its heart, the Timex Expedition Scout, like many other watches around this price point, uses a quartz-powered movement. Now, it's tried and true. Battery power is a no-fuss solution for anyone who wants an uber-low-maintenance watch, but the Expedition Scout does have one minor drawback. It's incredibly noisy. So much so that you can clearly hear this three-hander tick away on your nightstand when you're dozing off to sleep. If you're sensitive to sound, this is probably not the sub-$100 EDC reference for you, so keep this in mind. A genuine leather or NATO strap ships standard with the Timex Expedition Scout 40mm, and they look pretty sharp for what you pay, offering almost 10 adjustment slots and a simple brass buckle that matches the case finishing. However, if you'd like to switch things up, the Scout builds in a very standard 20mm lug width. Alright, yes, we did double down on Timex references, but in the interest of full transparency, they've been one of the only trusted brands to keep many of their iconic watches at a sub-$100 price point, even considering the recent inflation spikes that saw many other manufacturers consistently raise their prices. Yes, we're looking at you, Seiko. The Timex Weekender 40mm is another watch you can often find at your local retailer, like Target for example, who regularly stock the Weekender, like the Expedition Scout and a variety of case, dial, and strap options. Not only does this bode well for folks new to the game looking for their first timepiece, or seasoned vets revisiting an accessible, much-loved reference from their past, but it speaks to the brand power and business model Timex has worked tirelessly to create. The demand remains whether or not they raise their prices or keep them the same. As the name suggests, the Weekender sports a 40mm case that may be best summed up as an Expedition Scout, refined and elevated for a night out on the town. To be more specific, the Weekender keeps much of the field watch dial style, with the concentric rings of Arabic numerals and clean indices around the periphery, but opts for a rounded and mirror-polished brass case, with 2 sets of more elegant wire lugs over the Expedition Scout's thicker, fairly standard set. In addition to the 40mm case diameter, it has a thin height of 9mm, and a set of wire lugs that extend about the same distance out as the Scout, at approximately 49mm lug-to-lug. All said and done, if you're looking to spend under $100, we'd hazard a guess that aesthetic considerations are probably going to take precedence over maximizing the best possible internal specs, since as we mentioned, many references under $100 will be quartz-powered anyway. So with that being said, internally the Timex Weekender 40mm keeps the construction of the Expedition Scout with a loud quartz-powered movement that gets the job done but won't win any awards for accurate or quiet timekeeping. Where the Weekender 40mm outpaces the Expedition Scout by a slim margin would be the strap pairing options. By utilizing a mirror polish on the case, you have the option of dressing this classically styled reference up with a shinier leather band that wouldn't otherwise play so well with the Expedition Scout's more rugged matte finish case. That being said, you can certainly dress it down as well with its default NATO. Keeping in the quartz vein, if you've been looking for a dive-inspired watch or a watch with true diver styling cues, we'd understand if you've looked near and far for a decent pick under $100 and have come up empty. Finding one is no small feat. However, Casio provides one of the only dive watches under $100 that could even earn you a nod from the experts, quartz power aside. The Casio MDV-106-1AV, yes, Casio loves technical names, you can refer to it simply as the Casio Duro for short, screams dive watch from the moment you take it out of the box. From the rotating timing bezel to the trio of circular, rectangular, and triangular loomed indices, to the sharp angular hands and jet black dial background, the Casio Duro embodies all the trademarks of a classic diver at a mere $50 price point. Starting with the case, the Casio Duro uses a hefty 44.2mm case diameter with a 48mm lug-to-lug and a 12.1mm thickness. As with most divers due to the thick bezels, the dial itself will measure and consequently appear a bit smaller than the 44.2mm case would have you believe. Also, thanks to the shorter lug-to-lug in proportion to the diameter, we feel it wears a bit closer to 42mm on the wrist. One thing's for certain, for a $50 diver, Casio sure paid attention to the details. For example, the stainless steel case sports 2 levels of finishing that's no more evident than on the lugs themselves. A brush finish for the top of the lugs and a high polish that extends along the side of the case and around the bezel. The Casio Duro affords a generous 200 meters of water resistance and builds in a screw-down crown protected and framed by a set of crown guards. And on top, Casio builds in a functional unidirectional resin timing bezel. Ours is monotone, but Casio also provides other duotone options like a Pepsi bezel, a blue and red, and another a black and blue. Under mineral glass, Casio keeps the dial composition extremely classic, and we go so far as to say that it aligns most closely to the Rolex Submariner, which has really set the benchmark for diver styling since its advent. That is to say that the Casio Duro uses a jet black dial, bubbly circular indices punctuated by inverted triangles and rectangles at the cardinal hours, a thin chapter ring for minutes and seconds, large lume inset hands, a simple date cutout at the 3 o'clock position, a red tip seconds hand, and a bit of personalization with the Marlin logo just above the 6. Powering the diver, Casio sticks with their tried and true, a Japanese quartz-powered movement that's rated for up to 3 years of use. So the Duro is both inexpensive and incredibly easy to maintain, and by easy, it's virtually maintenance-free. Like other sub-$100 references, you can in good faith hold its timekeeping to any high standard, but the Casio Duro's quartz caliber should only lose or gain about 20 seconds per month. Last but not least, keeping diver styling through and through, the diver also ships with a standard wavy riveted rubber strap and a 22mm lug width in case you'd like to switch it up. Alright, we went for the Casio hat trick, but how could you not with so many sub-$100 references begging for a spot on this list that haven't given way to inflationary pressure? This guide almost certainly could have been entirely Casio had we not had some self-control, but we managed to rein it in and limit ourselves to 3. Although a few sit above our qualifier, the Casio G-Shock DW5600BB-1 is a fully blacked out sub-$100 take on the traditional and super popular squared off original DW5600. If you already have a blacked out set of EDC, especially gear a bit more tactical, and are in the market for a sub-$100 watch to match, this version of the G-Shock will certainly fit the bill at a current listing price of $83. G-Shock is a name that could live independently of its actual brand name, the Casio G-Shock. Since its release and adoption into the horological lexicon, it's proven incredibly successful now with dozens of iterations. And we could have picked many, so keep this in mind when you're looking at G-Shock specifically. There are many different colors, shapes, and dial designs, many offered with budget price tags at or around $100. Starting with the case, the DW5600BB-1 keeps the same case profile, materials, and size of the traditional DW5600, like the 42.8mm case diameter, the 48.9mm lug-to-lug, and the 13.4mm thickness, with the same 2x2 silver tone pushers on the right and left side to control the digital dial features, and the standard screw-down stainless steel case back. This incredibly tough-looking blacked-out version also protects against water up to 200 meters, so practical utility is also a major selling point, and is another trend across the G-Shock lineup as a whole. They're pieces that can stand up to incredible amounts of abuse and look the part doing so. Of course, the blacked-out digital dial is the most notable deviation from the original, but the convenient functions are all the same, like the included stopwatch, countdown timer, and alarm features, all controlled via the case's inlaid pushers, and with corresponding vertically laid out text on the black bezel frame. The digital dial readout is also fairly straightforward and keeps the same right-aligned placement of the time on the bottom and the day and date just above, with an inverted black and white color scheme. On the wrist, the rugged and ultra-stealthy DW5600BB-1 wears as what you'd expect if you've ever donned a G-Shock, incredibly comfortable, true to size, and lightweight because of its soft resin composite material. The ribbed resin strap also lets the wrist breathe, much like a diver strap, and is secured with a simple Casio-branded silver accent buckle. Like the Casio Duro molded after the Rolex Submariner, the Seiko SNX F05, one of many Seiko 5 references, may also ring a few bells with only a quick glance. Any guesses? You'd be correct if you said the Rolex Datejust, as this Seiko 5 serves up many similar design cues. Before we dive in, Seiko, not to be confused with Grand Seiko, like its other contemporaries, have situated themselves within the same budget-friendly territory. Timex has the Expedition line, Casio has the G-Shock, and Seiko has the 5 series. The 5 series is made up of dozens of different references across the field, dress, sports, and diver subcategories, but today we're looking at one that stayed around $100 for quite some time, as most of the other 5 series have elevated well past our qualifying threshold. The SNX F05 falls comfortably within the sports and/or dress category, as it most closely resembles the Rolex Datejust, which Rolex themselves categorize as part of their classic collection, and who many consider a dress watch in the context of other notable Rolex references. Let's start with the case. The Seiko SNX F05 uses a shape that most similarly aligns with Rolex's oyster-style cases in profile. At 37mm in diameter with a 42mm lug-to-lug and a 12mm thickness, the SNX F05 will certainly be comfortable for most wearers, and although it's considered a dress watch within the Seiko 5 lineup, there's plenty to love here for everyday use. As a dress watch, the main case and fixed bezel uses a high polish that's only interrupted near the lugs, where the integrated end link, which sports a brush finish, meets the case itself. As a sleek integration, Seiko even integrated the push-pull crown found at the 4 o'clock into the case and slightly behind the bottom right lug to minimize its appearance. Otherwise, overall thin proportions and smooth edges give the SNX F05's case a markedly dressed-up appearance. However, we think the dial here goes a long way to balance out that dimension of the case. Under a scratch-resistant Hardlex crystal, Seiko's own, the dial character is unique and almost a little retro. While it's not exactly three-dimensional, the graph-like dial background texture overlaid onto an off-white base gives this Seiko 5 an almost 90s flair. It kinda feels like a sheet of graph paper since it sports similar faded and repetitive 90-degree intersecting lines that cut behind the applied elements of the dial. You get similar thin indices as the Datejust, but instead of a chapter ring, Seiko uses a series of lume dots as the outermost dial element that gives this reference some decent low-light utility as well. The dial also utilizes a retro Seiko 5 logo, a day and date window cut out at the 3 o'clock, and a pair of lume inset hands. The analog dial of the Seiko 5 SNX F05 is powered with the Seiko S726 automatic caliber that's widely found in Seiko's entry-level 5 series watches, affording low maintenance if you're looking to rep this 5 series as a go-anywhere do-anything watch. It's also worth pointing out that the S726 eventually did get replaced by the current 4R36 caliber, which also allows for hacking and hand-winding, but you can still get this uber-popular movement service should you run into any issues. For under $100, the 3-link stainless steel bracelet is all around really comfortable on the wrist, allows for adjustments and micro-adjustments, and comes with a no-nonsense push clasp for easy-on, easy-off wear. For its unique dial character, we'd recommend the Seiko 5 SNX F05 for anyone who loves the styling of the iconic Datejust, who may be looking for a more accessible yet classy everyday watch with a little more character than a traditional dress variant. Dieter Rams, Bauhaus, minimalism. You may hear each of these referred to in any conversation about Braun, the famous German consumer electronics firm. In case you can't connect the dots, here's a quick overview before we highlight the Braun watch, a minimalistic sub-$100 reference that embodies everything great about the company. In 1955, almost 35 years after its start, Braun onboarded designer Dieter Rams, the father of modern minimalism, who quickly streamlined their design language under his own personal philosophy of less but better, or what folks like to refer to today as simply minimalism. Fast forward, and Braun as it stands today as a consumer electronics brand owes their success in no small part to his work and lasting vision. The Braun watch, reference BN0024, is a beautiful encapsulation of his influence from the monochromatic color palette to the absolutely stark white dial. This is just one of Braun's watch offerings, but it stands as one of the only under $100 that maintains a simple, classic presentation. Feel free to check out their others, should you have a bit more to spend. Starting with the case, the Braun watch uses a very low-profile, fully satinized 38mm stainless steel case that's very similar in nature to Braun's original wall clocks, which is to say almost devoid of a frame entirely, letting the dial character stand at the forefront. It also measures at just 8.5mm thick, so it'll sit extremely flush on the wrist. In terms of utility, the Braun watch certainly prioritizes aesthetic over hard-wearing specs, since it just features a push-pull crown that only affords about 50 meters of water resistance. That would be fine for short bouts of submersion, but certainly nothing substantial. On the 180, the Braun watch features the same purist styling as the rest of the reference, with a simple matte frame surrounding a high-polished and vertically brushed branded caseback. Even though each construction element of the watch lives and breathes minimalism, chances are, if you are already intrinsically drawn to the Braun watch with a quick glance, your focus is probably on the dial design, which harkens back to Braun's mid-century wall clocks that feature an extremely sparse and timeless design. Set against an off-white background and under a plane of mineral glass, the thin black indices and applied Arabic numerals for the 12-hour markers are laid on completely flat, with a pair of thin rectangular hour and minute hands that match the indices themselves. Just above the 6, the Braun watch dial builds in a 60-second subdial that sports a bright yellow hand. This is typical across their entire product catalog, as they often employ single, bright accent colors to break up their largely monochromatic black and white color schemes. Inside, the simple three-hander is powered by a Japanese quartz movement that will allow no-fuss wear for years before needing a battery switch, and will also prove reliable in terms of accurate timekeeping. Rounding off our overview, Braun supplies the watch with an extremely plush leather strap for the sub $100 price point, with a smooth fine-grained finish and rectangular adjustment slots matching the buckle hardware. This watch does sport a standard 20mm lug width and allows for swaps, but let's be honest here, with each element of the watch thoroughly considered and backed up by iconic design history, we really feel that you should leave this strap on the watch to wear as is. All in all, the Braun watch is a fantastic choice for someone who may be in a design field or who appreciates simple and timeless execution. We also maintain that it could be a top-tier choice as a dress watch that builds in a little bit more character than something a bit more standard might afford. Our last watch pick under $100 is for all the field watch fans, the Bertucci A-1S. The field watch space is undoubtedly one of the most popular and recognizable designs in watchmaking, alongside the diver, and this has only been sustained since their practical wartime applications due in no small part to brands like Timex, who have appropriated the style for civilian products. Bertucci has a very short history compared to other iconic field watch brands like Timex and Hamilton, who have been making these types of watches for military applications for many decades. They've only been around since 2003, but have quickly made a name for themselves by offering attractive and traditional field watches with solid specifications for an affordable price. For example, the A-1S field watch, although not backed up by the same direct military heritage as Hamilton, sits right around $100, while the famous khaki field will almost certainly run close to 5 times that amount. To keep costs low, they've designed and assembled in the USA with foreign components, and serve as more rugged, budget-friendly field watch options over Timex, as Bertucci tends to build with better materials and design more true to form. Beginning with the case, the A-1S field watch uses a small 36mm case diameter with a chunky 10.8mm thickness and sports a lug-to-lug measurement of 44.8mm. On the wrist, the dial will wear a bit smaller, but the longer lug-to-lug does extend over the wrist a decent amount, which is typical for a field watch. You can see this with the Hamilton khaki field, for example, that maintains similar case proportions. Smaller diameter, larger lug-to-lug. The hyper-durable patented unibody stainless steel case also features full brushing, a screw-down crown offset at the 4 o'clock position that protects against water up to 100 meters, and allows for full wrist mobility, and a screw-down case back on the 180. The A-1S protects the dial with a scratch-resistant R-type mineral crystal, which is far less durable than sapphire with a hardness rating of about half. But for the price, considering the A-1S floats around $100, a mineral crystal is par for the course compared to more costly sapphire and still does a moderate job protecting against scuffs and scrapes. And since it is a bit softer, you'll find buffing away any light abrasions relatively easy, or you can always opt to swap it out completely as this is not cost prohibitive. The dial itself is laid out in a very traditional field watch style, from the large applied 12-hour Arabic numerals, to the smaller concentric ring of 24-hour numerals, to the thin indices punctuated by circular loom dots, all the way down to the tapered shape of the hands themselves, which are inlaid with thin strips of loom dubbed by Bertucci as Swiss superluminous material, akin to something like superluminova. The loom on the A-1S dial operates by exposure versus Timex's push-button style Indiglo, which doesn't drain the battery and is rated to last for hours of visibility after decent light exposure. Although Timex's Indiglo feature is certainly unique, it does only last as long as you are able to physically push the crown, which can be inconvenient. Rounding out the dial, as a great accent, the A-1S uses a full red finish seconds hand with a small strip of loom near the tip and a shield-shaped counterbalance that distinctly pops against the rich jet black dial background. Inside, the Bertucci A-1S uses a Japanese quartz movement, like most of the others on this list, and is officially rated to keep the watch powered for 4 years between battery swaps. Like the others, not much to report on here other than to reiterate the maintenance-free convenience a quartz movement bakes in. A great NATO strap is a hallmark of a great field watch. The Bertucci A-1S provides a premium B-type heavy-duty nylon webbing strap with bolstered stitching at key stress points, and a solid stainless steel buckle and dual keeper loops. So all said and done, the Bertucci A-1S is a great alternative to the Timex Expedition Scout and bakes in a bit more character at the same time.